And welcome back to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is our power rankings for the MLR after week number 12. Now, week number 12, it was an exciting week of rugby, but, honestly, not a lot of surprising turnouts for the games. Games kind of went the way that pretty much predicted, which is very evident with our Super Brew picks, which will be done in the next video. But because of that, not a lot of changes in the power rankings. As always, if this is the first time you've seen my power ranking videos, power rankings are based purely on what happens on the pitch. It has nothing to do with the records, with the standings of the tables in the Western or Eastern Conference. It is about who looked like the best team that week. Also determines by how much you win in the game, how much a team loses, whether the team loses at home, if you lose to a lower ranking team, if you get dominated by a higher ranking team. If a higher ranking team dominates a low ranking team, that won't really make them move up much in the rankings. So a lot of things go into the rankings, but not really anything to do with your record. So you might not necessarily see the top teams on the tables at the top, though it usually kind of pans out that way. I mean, you can't be the first place team and not be at least in the top 4 in the power rankings. It just doesn't make any sense. But so if there's any question about that, that's the explanation. So let's go straight into it. Unfortunately, they're making a habit of it now, and I don't think it's going to change much. You're a number 13 team once again this week. The new kids on the block, the Dallas Shackles, once again getting dominated in their game. And dominated by a team that used to be in the bottom with them, Old Glory DC. It's frustrating as they're my second favorite team behind, of course, the LA Guiltinis. You're reigning, defending MLR champions, the LA Guiltinis. The Dallas Shackles I want to say that they might have a chance to win at least one game this season, but man, it's not looking good. They've been dealing with a lot of adversity, especially with the injuries that happened, the freakish event that took out like 6 or 7 members of the team. It's going to be very, very tough for them, and it definitely doesn't help when you're beaten that badly, 50-10, to a team that was struggling like they were to get their very first victory, and now they have 2 under their belts in Old Glory DC. I just don't think Dallas is going to get out of the bottom of the cellar here in the power rankings. Number 12, another team that has been pretty much near the bottom is NOLA Gold. NOLA Gold, again, still looking for that first home victory. They were competitive in the first 20 minutes of their game against the one of the top teams in the power ranking, the Austin Gilgronis, but unfortunately were just beaten at the end, 32-10. NOLA is struggling quite a bit now in the season as well as in the power rankings. They stay near the bottom at number 12. Also staying at the bottom, again, another team that's just kind of not really moving much. They lost their head coach, and that change, unlike the one with Old Glory, where they lost their head coach and are now actually looking better, Utah still, there's just something wrong with Utah. They're not the team that we thought, well, that I thought they were going to be in 2022. They are struggling quite a bit here. They made the game really close. They lost 14-20 to the Seattle Seawolves. They made it pretty close near the end, but again, they didn't look like a dominant team, or they didn't look like a strong team. They didn't look like the team, like I said, like last year. There still is quite a bit of something that's missing with them, and I don't believe a change in head coach has changed anything. I still feel that when they score points, it's because there's some involvement by their best weapons on the field, Mika Kruse and Mikey Teo. When Mikey Teo or Mika Kruse are not around, the team flounders. And it's, again, very, very apparent in this game. So, unfortunately, they stay at number 11. Number 10, sliding down a spot, is going to be the San Diego Legion, another team that is starting to kind of struggle this late in the season. Granted, they played against arguably the best team in the league right now, Rugby ATL. But, man, what started out as a pretty competitive game in San Diego ended up San Diego just tired out in the second half. They fell behind 17-32. Rugby ATL is proving to be, again, the best team in the league. So, not a huge drop from number 9 to number 10, but San Diego is kind of floundering out in a very, very competitive Western division that they need to win to stay competitive in. Moving up a spot, granted, they kind of picked on the lowest ranking team, but still impressive, putting up 50 points against anybody, is Old Glory DC. As I mentioned before, like the Utah Warriors, they lost their head coach, but unlike the Utah Warriors, it seems the changing head coaches actually looks good for Old Glory. They have now on a 2-game win streak. We'll see if that continues. They are still kind of a lower bottom team, but they might be able to make a run. I don't feel they're anywhere close to going into the playoffs, but at least ending the season on a high note rather than floundering like some of these other teams are right now in 2022. Staying at number 8, the Seattle Seawolves, your 2-time MLR champions. As mentioned before, they had a very, very competitive game against Utah. The first half, they were pretty dominant. Utah kind of came back in the second. I got to give a mention to the Seattle's MVP so far in the season, in my opinion. Behind AJ Alatimu, who unfortunately has been suffering with some injuries, is their team captain, Rickard Hatting. Guy is just a beast, amazing. He's a try-scoring machine. He scored 2 tries, is now on top of the try-scoring table for 2022 with 8 tries this season. He definitely helped Seattle come back from being down a point, 13-14, to coming back up 20-14 and taking the win against the Utah Warriors. Unfortunately, the struggle against Utah didn't allow them to go up a spot, but at least they didn't drop a spot. Likewise, we have the next team, Rugby New York, at number 7. They had a very good game against New England Free Jacks. Unfortunately, came up just short, losing by 2 points, 26-24. Ed Fido is another person that needs a mentioning here. He is a score-trying machine, scored 2 tries in this game. The tagline is "Feed the Beast." You feed Ed Fido, and good things happen. Unfortunately, not enough to win against New England, but they came very, very close. And even though they lost, I felt that it didn't warrant them to slide down. And even though Seattle won, again, it's all about, how you win, about the opponents that you play against. Seattle barely beating Utah. Rugby New York losing to one of the top teams in New England by only 2 points. I didn't feel that there's any reason for these two teams to switch, so I kept Rugby New York at 7, Seattle at number 8. But it should be mentioned that, Rugby New York is kind of sliding as well. They're suffering some tough losses and a very competitive Eastern Conference. They used to be up here in the top 4 and now sliding down at the worst time in the season to start to slide down as we head to the final and to the playoffs. Number 6, sliding out a spot, is the Toronto Arrows, who, after a pretty good homestand, kind of struggling again as they are away from home. Made a lot of mistakes in a game that I felt was kind of winnable against Houston, but unfortunately those mistakes, especially in the set pieces, the lineouts, cost the Arrows, and they lost 29-17 to Houston, who coincidentally are the next team up, number 5, the Houston SaberCats. These teams started at number 6 and 5, but because Houston beat the Arrows, flipped them around. Houston dominated in the first half. It was a very, very physical game. They capitalized a lot on the Arrows' mistakes and ended up with the win and going to number 5. The only team with a bye is your reigning and defending MLR champions, the LA Guiltinis, so they stay at number 4. I don't feel that anything like Houston's win over the Arrows warrants them to jump over LA, so they stay at number 4. Number 3, number 2, and number 1 pretty much look the same as they did last week. Your top teams of the league so far. Number 3, New England Free Jacks with a very hard-fought victory over Rugby New York. Was debating about sliding them down a little bit, but I don't like even the team that I really want to root for. I don't feel if you're on a bye you should slide up because you didn't play. Free Jacks did win. It wasn't by much, but they still won. It was a very, very tough game. Got a shout out again to Bodine Waka for, even though he's had a quiet March after a very, very exciting February, he still reminds people why he is one of the top players of the game. There was a beautiful last try, not by Bodine Waka, but Bodine Waka kind of started the try. If you didn't see it in the game, download the Rugby Network and you can watch the replay. It was a beautiful try that the Free Jacks scored to get the victory. They won, again, 26-24. The number 2 spot, the Austin Gilgronis, top team in the West. Pretty dominant victory, 32-10 over NOLA. And then, of course, in the number 1 spot, a pretty dominant victory for Rugby ATL. Top team in the Eastern Conference alongside of the Free Jacks. Only behind the Free Jacks by a couple points, and but still, even though the Free Jacks, like I said, are the top team in the Eastern Conference, ATL is just behind them. On the pitch, ATL looks like the better team. So much so that if ATL and Free Jacks go against each other, I would think ATL would come off as the victor. They proved themselves, again, dominant over San Diego, 32-17. So again, not a lot of movements, also why this video is going to be pretty short, but that's kind of how, again, power rankings are supposed to be, especially when things go the way that they're supposed to be. Your top teams beat the bottom teams. There is some interesting development with some teams kind of sliding at the worst possible times. New York, San Diego in a very competitive West, a very competitive Eastern Conference. But you're starting to see, again, some of the top teams that are vying for those playoff spots. New England being one of them, ATL being another, Austin possibly LA, though again, LA still has to deal with San Diego, with the SaberCats, and Seattle, all kind of on the verge of jumping over, especially Houston, still playing very physical rugby. But it's still very interesting, still very exciting. So as always, let me know what you think about my power rankings, if your favorite team made it to the top or they're floundering at the bottom. Again, we still have about 5 more weeks of action, so anything can happen in 5 weeks of rugby. So as always, thank you very much for watching my video, and I'll see you on the pitch.